Thank you for joining this session called The Future of Martech Hinges on Customer Understanding. This session is provided by Mapp, joined by a guest speaker from Forrester. Let's begin. The concept of campaigns and segments is nothing new. It's very rational, it's very easy to understand. However, it hinges on something so fundamentally flawed and very often irrational, and that is human beings, right? So in many ways, when we engage customers, we want to create this customer-centric customer experience. We're trying to balance these customer priorities with the brand priorities. And in many ways, that creates significant opportunities for improving all the things that you're doing in marketing. When I think about marketing, I like to compare it to sport. Now, some people do it to stay fit, other people do it to win Olympic gold medals. And we all know that you can't win Olympic gold unless you analyze every single thing that you do. However, in marketing, quite often, there's very few people that can actually understand how to extract insights from data and operationalize it on a regular basis. In fact, recently, we helped one of our customers to improve the customer identification rates on the website by being able to understand where are we actually losing customers through this buying funnel. And without them being able to understand that, they were focusing too much on the bottom of the funnel through improving creatives and the content. Now, let me introduce myself. My name is Rick, and I'm the Senior Director of Global Strategy at Mapp Digital. I am joined by a person that has built his entire career on analyzing data, extracting insights, and sharing those insights with B2C marketing professionals. Please meet VP Principal Analyst at Forrester, Rusty Warner. Rusty, customer insights analytics is nothing new. However, the spend in those two areas are on the rise. Now, why do you think this is happening now? And why is it becoming more important than ever to bring customer insights closer to engagement?
Well, thanks, Rick, and thanks for the introduction. I think there's a couple of forces that are driving this focus on customer insights and customer analytics today. And you touched on the first one already. It's that human, it's that customer that we're trying to interact with. And regardless of what all of us do in our jobs, we are all at the same time consumers. So I think we can relate to the fact that we all bring rising expectations to the brands that we interact with, and we want them to serve us. We want them to deliver what we're looking for exactly in our moments of need. And serving that human is the first challenge. And of course, serving that human has become more and more difficult because as our expectations continue to rise, we're using a lot more digital devices, we're generating a lot more data, and we saw that accelerate during the pandemic, where more and more people were using digital channels out of necessity. So even people who might have interacted with your brand in a physical location were now turning to digital devices. And that creates a lot of data that you can use to improve the way that you interact with customers. But of course, if you don't get it exactly right, there are two problems that crop up. One is that those expectations that we all have are not necessarily being defined by a brand like yours. Those expectations are actually being defined by the mega brands like Amazon or Apple or Google, who are spending absolute fortunes on determining how to provide a better customer experience in digital channels. So every time someone interacts with one of those brands and gets a great experience, that person will bring that expectation to your brand. So that bar that continues to rise for your brand is actually being artificially set by these mega brands. And then secondly, I mentioned if you don't get it quite right, you can create some problems. What you don't want is that situation that we see here where you see that person with that brain. We don't want to put any kind of stress on the customer. We don't want to increase the customer's cognitive load and make them figure out how to interact with us. And that's, again, especially true during a situation like the pandemic, where perhaps people have less time, less patience, everyone's a little bit stressed. If you don't leverage that data in a way that makes it easier for them, or you get it wrong and you make it harder for them, then you really start to lose faith in the customer's eyes. So, what can you do about that? Well, at Forrester, we think that organizations need to become customer obsessed. And you're probably thinking, okay, here he goes. That's one of those Forrester buzzwords. And it's something that we hold up here as a lofty aspiration. Actually, we're quite serious about customer obsession, and we've defined some principles that we believe you should embrace in order to become more customer obsessed. First of all, we think you have to become customer led. Now, everyone's aware of their customers and they engage with those customers, but what we're getting at here is actually leveraging those customer insights to make all of your business decisions, not just about how you serve the customer, but how you will operate as an organization. And that means that you become insight driven from top to bottom, and you'll use those insights to improve the business operations. We think as you start to do that, you'll become faster. And we even believe that being faster is more important than being perfect. Now, we're not telling you to go out and be reckless and make a lot of decisions that might get you into trouble, but we are thinking that with these insights, you can do some experimentation. You can try new things and you can find out very quickly if those new things that you're trying are going to work with your customers. And if so, then you can invest further and make that part of your operation. Of course, as you're doing that, one of the important things you have to do is connect the dots across the organization. Rick mentioned customer insights are not new, and obviously all parts of the organization have customer data and they're deriving insights from those data points in order to serve customers. But if you're doing that in marketing, in sales, in service, in commerce, and you're not connecting the dots, then you can really end up with a lot of data, but not a lot of great insight for how to become customer led. Now, to support these core customer obsession principles, there are some underlying pillars. And most of those pillars have to do with the organization. It will come down to the way you're structured, the culture within the company, the talent and skills of the people, the way you define your metrics and processes. But technology plays a critical role. And in fact, we'll spend a lot of the presentation talking about technology as we look at how that supports your ability to derive customer insights. And that means that you're going to need to listen to your customers. You're going to need to pull in a lot of customer data that you can turn into customer understanding. You can then use that to become a leader in your market by defining a brand strategy based on those insights. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, you need to connect the dots within the organization so that you can deliver that brand experience on a consistent basis and you can live up to that brand strategy every single day. And then, of course, the insights don't stop there. You have to keep collecting data and insights so that you can calibrate. You're going to constantly measure so that you can optimize and improve. And that's a point I'll come back to a little bit later when Rick and I start talking about what you should be doing next. Now, you might be wondering, okay, so Rusty, this topic is all about customer insights, and you've just spent all of this time talking to me about customer obsession and strategy. Why is that so important? Well, that brings me to that second factor beyond the human, beyond the customer. And that factor is that we have so much technology and we have so many ways of capturing data that a lot of organizations are just really struggling with the weight of that technology and all of that data that's coming in. And it's really hard for them to derive insights that they can use to become customer obsessed. As we see here from the chief marketing officer of Chipotle, who is a Mexican restaurant chain, if you keep throwing money at the problem and you keep buying different pieces of technology that are all going to ingest data and try to use insights, you're going to create a lot of chaos that makes it harder for your organization. And it, in fact, will make you less efficient at being able to use those insights in order to drive the business.
The points you mentioned around becoming insight-led are also very important to us as a marketing technology vendor. We started a journey as Europe's leader in digital marketing automation, and over the years we expanded into other channels beyond email, such as mobile push, web personalization, paid media activation. But we came to a point where we had to stop and think what is the next thing we could do to help marketers improve. And then we realized that there is nothing more value generating for our customers than the ability to operationalize the process for extracting insights for marketers in a way that every individual running the campaign can identify improvement opportunities and understand and make use of those insights instantly. Yet we find some brands choose to intentionally separate marketing and analytics. In fact, one of customers told me that they prevent their marketing team from accessing Google Analytics because they think it's distracting for them to focus on the core function of executing campaigns because it's just too difficult to use. So, Rusty, what do you think is holding brands back from becoming more insights led?
Yeah, I think it's a multifaceted problem, and we could talk about lots of different reasons, but let's focus on three. And you talked about the first one, Rick. It's that organizational issue. It's that the data and insights are managed in IT or perhaps a data science team where there's a bit of a disconnect between marketing or other business users that want access to that data so that they can do something with it. And we've got to begin to solve those kinds of problems. The second one would be the technology issue that we just talked about, where there's too much. There's too many systems, too many silos. All of these different points in the ecosystem are capturing data, and it gets difficult to then find your way through the mess you've created in order to get to the insights that will make a difference. And then I think the third area would be situational, where there are always priority changes or something will happen like the pandemic that might make you focus on certain issues and you lose track of that bigger picture. And so you've got to make sure that you have planned in a way that lets you continue to leverage insights or even turn it up so that you can do that in a more efficient way if there is a change like the pandemic. And I think marketers really do want to do what we've been talking about here, Rick. They tell us that they have those high aspirations of working with IT or by uh, 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 setting a strategy for their technology that is agreed by everybody. But despite the numbers that we just saw about how many marketers are dedicated to those aspirations, they are overwhelmed by complexity. So even if 2/3 of them tell me they've got a strategy that everyone has embraced, more than 40% of them will also tell me that there's redundancy in the MarTech ecosystem, that their technology portfolio is too complex. We even have nearly 2/3 of marketers telling us they want to reduce the number of vendors that they work with because that would make things a little bit easier, but they can't go out to a single vendor and get everything, and then they're stuck trying to piece it together. So that complexity becomes a problem that gets in the way of those aspirations, even if they've solved some of those organizational issues that we talked about. And to help marketers with that, we've defined what we like to call the enterprise marketing core. And that core set of technologies depend both on systems of insight and systems of engagement. But the data and insights are definitely the foundation here for your MarTech ecosystem and to form the core of the technology that you will use and continue to build on. So within the data fabric layer, we know that customer data management itself is critical, and all of those customer profiles and data ingestion and building out those sets of audiences that you're going to use to communicate with your customers. And Rick, you mentioned earlier identity and the need to match digital identities with customer profiles so that we can be consistent when we interact with those customers. And we think identity resolution has become one of those core investment areas right there integrated into that data fabric. Of course, then those customer obsession principles come into play: customer understanding, brand strategy, and brand experience. And for customer understanding, after you've built the profiles and you're up and running, you need to focus on the insights that will let you continuously optimize. Once you build your brand strategy, you need insights from the customer journeys, and you need insights from your content and the way that content is being used and the way customers interact with it, so you can continue to keep your brand strategy where it needs to be and very efficient. And then finally, for brand experience, unified orchestration sounds purely like an engagement element, but actually it depends on insights as well to know what are the channels the customer prefers, what's the right time, how do we know what we should be doing outbound versus what we do on an inbound channel when the customer initiates an interaction. So everything we see here in blue would be what we define as the enterprise marketing core, and all of those capabilities are driven by customer insights. Of course, we know that everything I just showed you is much easier said than done, because when we go out and talk to customers about the data they're collecting and then the data that they're using to deliver better experiences to their customers, whether that's a loyalty offer or a personalized campaign, or it's something that is responsive to a customer need, they're telling us that they're capturing a lot of data, but they're not really great at using it. So they're good at collecting response data. They're great at collecting transactional data. They're even good at collecting behavioral data or customer feedback and voice of the customer data. But as you can see here in the lighter green, even though a lot of organizations are capturing that data, they're not yet fully effective at using that data. And then when you get to more interesting data types that I think we're going to see more of, all of that interaction data that's coming from the inbound channels or voice or mobile, that's even very difficult for a lot of marketers to capture, let alone think about using. And we hear this a lot from marketers, and they do sum it up for us with some key challenges that they describe. One of the challenges is just integrating online data and offline data so that they can understand the customer behavior across both that digital world and the physical world. And then, of course, all of those devices that we mentioned earlier are posing a big challenge. Just being able to understand behavior as the customer moves across those digital devices. And then an even larger number of the marketers I talk to tell me that they struggle with using insights for measurement. So actually attributing performance and measuring what's happening can be more of a challenge than using the insights for customer engagement. Of course, if you can get it right, there are some great rewards out there for becoming an insights-driven business. And Forrester has looked at this very closely. We have various metrics that we look at for organizations that are using insights to become customer obsessed or to be customer led and to focus on customer experiences. And what we find is that organizations who can articulate a strategy that is based on data and insights actually have higher annual growth than those organizations that are still struggling to leverage insights. In fact, we see some organizations that are rivaling startups that we know are very innovative and have very rapid growth. We're seeing insights-driven organizations start to keep pace with some of those innovative startups because of what the data helps them do in terms of drive better business decisions. And that does require a balance, because when we talk to marketers, they tell us that the number one thing that they are responsible for is driving revenue. And that's not a surprise, I think, because we are all business people. So driving revenue is a top goal for everyone. But in addition to driving revenue, I'm pleased that marketers are becoming more focused on the experience of customers. They're focused on the marketplace and their influence in that marketplace, and building a community or building a value-based kind of brand strategy. They're focused on improving products and being innovative and becoming more adaptive and quicker to market when needs change or when conditions evolve, like the pandemic. And of course, all of those things do support revenue, but we've got to get the balance right between just driving conversions and trying to focus on revenue and all of these other elements of customer experience that we can drive using our insights to improve the overall business.
I must say, this is very interesting, Rusty, in particularly the Forrester estimate that the insight-led businesses will grow 7 to 10 times faster than the global economy. But this does mean that the marketing teams need to stop relying on revenue as their primary KPI. So what you're proposing is transforming the business as customer insights led from the ground up. But embarking on this type of transformation can be daunting for many marketers. So what do you recommend brands should do in the next 3 months if they haven't embarked on this journey yet? Where do they begin?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Rick, because as you just said, calculating ROI or measuring uplift can be difficult. I think we have lots of organizations that are able to do that at a transactional level, and they can measure uplift on certain channels, but it's really able to do that at a transactional level, and they can measure uplift on certain channels, but it's really difficult to think about it holistically. And I think that's what organizations need to do. They need to think about it holistically and then define some use cases or some first steps in order to get started and measure those. And then based on that success, they can, or not, they can tweak what they're doing so that they can then continue on that more holistic strategy. So you asked about next steps. I think even though you're not going to do this in the next 3 months, if you haven't already, you need to start consolidating your data so that you have a centrally managed ecosystem. Now, I'm not saying a single database, because it won't be a single database, but you have to have a customer data management strategy that is holistic. And like I said, if there are high priority use cases, focus on those first and find a way to execute those and measure those and gauge your success. But at the same time, have in mind that that's going to be part of this bigger, more holistic ecosystem. When you're defining those metrics for success, even though there are lots of uplift or conversion metrics that marketers use, I think you need to start thinking about how to have some more customer focused metrics, the ones that are going to matter from the outside in, the ones that will help you understand what the customers want, how well you're serving those customers, and then how that is going to move the needle for the business. And as you're setting up those first use cases, I would focus on ones where you know that you've got a gap, where you are not delivering as well as you should. Perhaps you're not getting good results. Maybe you're getting complaints even from customers because you're not quite able to deliver the experience that you want. So focus on those. And as you're defining or designing those experiences and those interactions, focus on how they can help you capture the data that you need for measurement so that you're not just using data to execute, but that actual experience is helping you capture data and insights. Of course, as you capture that data, you have to connect the dots, as we've said a couple of times. So you can be collecting data from one channel or one experience, which will be useful across other experiences with your customers. Now, we know that privacy and security come into play here. And of course, there are different regulations that will govern that. But I think more important than the regulation is the spirit of creating some trust with your customers so that you are explaining to them clearly when you're capturing this data and why and how it's going to be used. And then, of course, when you embed that in the experiences, doing with it what you told them you would do, those experiences will begin to speak for themselves so that your customers don't necessarily think that you're trying to beat them up for information at every turn just to build a profile.
I wanted to share kind of a couple of examples based on what Rusty was talking about in terms of what brands could be doing right now. And I know Rusty mentioned that 83% of marketers are already aligning their marketing KPIs as one of the main things that they do. But what I also find is that whilst brands are aligning their marketing KPIs, quite often they're still using different tools and platforms to do so, which, and you might have your paid media agency, using one platform for analyzing performance. Your CRM kind of a platform will be using something entirely different, which obviously will result some gaps in the insight, or maybe even give you wrong kind of insight, right? So what we find is actually making sure that you do have a single set of KPIs available to all the internal, external stakeholders, and not only KPIs based on revenue, but also KPIs based on cost and reoccurring customer engagement and satisfaction and all those other things are kind of on tap is extremely valuable. Some of the other examples by having better customer insights is actually understanding the different behavior patterns that our customers showing depending on their preferred method of interaction. So in this example, we can look at things like, what is the expected engagement frequency for social media followers? Because quite frequently in marketing teams rely on these averages. This is the average expected number of days for visits for this particular customer. However, those averages don't mean much to each individual customer. Like every unique customer, as I was saying at the beginning, we can be very rational. We have these random behavior patterns, and particularly now in the pandemic, right? That's even more accelerated. So I think really understanding what the individual behavior patterns are, far beyond the basket size and frequency of visit is very, very important. Also then understanding one of the previous points that Rusty mentioned is also not only analyzing the main marketing KPIs, but also things like internal costs. Right, so not only understanding or predicting the customer churn or how customers are disengaging, but also understanding the value of those churning customers and the cost to retain those customers over acquiring other customers is becoming more and more significant, right? Because in some cases, there might be certain type of customers that might not necessarily be profitable during the current situation. And I think we could be looking at spending money kind of elsewhere. And also understanding the role that each individual channel play in delivering certain action, because all too often the KPIs are so focused towards driving the conversion from each individual kind of engagement channel, but we know that not every single channel is there to sell, right? So it's about identifying what role is this channel specifically playing when it comes to a particular objective that we're trying to achieve, or particular objective that the customer is trying to achieve, and then optimizing that rather than the revenue. And then we do believe that the insights are only as valuable as your ability to operationalize it, right? It's great to have these amazing insights, but if there is no way for the team to actually act upon that in a systematic way, then obviously those insights will be wasted, right? So we believe the ability to actually make sure that every single piece of insight is in one way or another is linked to an individual customer. So you're able to act upon that either through sending a campaign or re-engaging customers is extremely valuable. And this is what we call kind of this from aha to clicks moment, where we're able to identify this insight and then re-engage the customers. So let me quickly summarize what we talked about today. And I really like this diagram that Rusty shared earlier. I'm sure many of you will be screenshotting that. It's the insights-driven business will grow 7 to 10 times faster than the global economy. And I think that's a phenomenal figure. And I think we all start to understand why. Also, we need to become customer obsessed, not only in the way we personalize or the way we speak to customers, but customer obsessed through our strategy and through the way we deliver the customer insights, not only based on the marketing metrics, but also based on the metrics that are actually very important to customers, like customer satisfaction and delivery rates. Also, when you start centering our technology investments around strategy, and this kind of comes from being or becoming more customer obsessed. And the way Rusty suggested that we do this is through instilling this culture throughout the business that is focused around the value of the customer insights. And also, I think the last really good point from that Rusty made, at least for me, is that we should rationalize and also kind of rethink our previous and the new Martech investments to make sure that we're actually enabling this this ability to close the gap between the insights engagement, which is very critical. Rusty, I really would like to thank you for joining the session today. I personally found it extremely insightful. I'm sure many people listening to the session found so as well. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.